Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about positively security, making PCI work for your business. So I'm going to start by sharing my presentation. If you hold on a second, get this going here. All right. So obviously, positively looks a little bit different since we're talking about point of sale. That's a large part of the PCI DSS compliance. But even if you accept credit card payments and you don't utilize point of sale hardware and software, this webinar is still for you. So here's what we're going to cover today: the recent changes to PCI DSS compliance requirements and what it means for your organization. I'm going to tell you the stories of 3 different businesses today, and the names of these people, though, have been changed for their protection. So the first person I'm going to share with you is Sarah. And Sarah owns a successful small business with 3 locations, has 15 employees and customers who love coming in. However, last month, Sarah got a call that changed everything. Ma'am, we're calling from your payment processor. Your business has been flagged for PCI non-compliance. You have 30 days to fix this or we'll have to terminate your merchant account. Sarah had no idea what PCI even stood for. She thought that accepting credit cards was as simple as plugging in a terminal, but she was wrong. Now her entire business was at risk. And unfortunately, Sarah's story isn't unique. So right now, thousands of business owners are getting similar calls. The payment industry changed the rules this past March, and businesses that didn't adapt are facing real consequences. So the question is, are you going to be like Sarah, scrambling to catch up, or are you going to be prepared? And that's what we want to help educate you on today and give you that choice. But before we dive in further, let me give you a brief background about Iler Networking Computing and who we are here. So at Iler Networking and Computing, we're a managed services and security provider. That means we handle companies' IT needs. And so this is our 31st year in business. So we're not a new startup. We've been doing this for quite a while. Our headquarters are here in Sheffield Village, Ohio, but we also have branches in Iowa and South Carolina. We do have plans to open up 3 other states as well. We're fully managed IT. What that means is for small to mid-sized businesses that don't have a dedicated IT department, we can come in and we handle the IT. We are the IT department. However, for larger companies that do have IT departments, we can do co-manage. What that means is we assist companies that have the IT department, but we bring in our cybersecurity solutions, our security knowledge, and help out as much or as little as they need to make sure that they're doing everything they can to protect their business. Some things that differentiate us: we always answer the phones live during working hours. You're not going to call and get our numbers and press 1 for tech support, press 2 for sales, that type of thing. You actually get a live human answering the phone. And we have multiple assurance service plans to meet your IT needs. Last year, we expanded from our 3 that we had had for many years up to 4 now, so that we can make sure that we are meeting whatever needs that you might have. And we also have added to our offering several years ago compliance as a service, and that's part of what we're discussing today. One other thing that differentiates us is all of our techs are CJIS certified. CJIS stands for the Criminal Justice Information Systems. Since we have multiple law enforcement agencies that we support, this makes sure that all of our techs are have a background check, are fingerprinted, and they have the highest level of requirements for our techs. And so you can rest assured that our techs are going to protect your data and make sure that we're doing everything we need to be doing along with those lines. So let me tell you about one of the awards we recently awarded, and it's the MSP Titans of the Industry Award. This was a red carpet gala event that was held in Beverly Hills, definitely outside of my comfort zone. And it was hosted at the iconic Beverly Hilton. It's the same venue where the Golden Globe Awards take place, and the evening was truly unforgettable. So this event featured appearances by Jay Leno and Magic Johnson, which added to the excitement and prestige of the night. So we were honored to be recognized as one of only 10 managed services providers globally named as finalists for excellence in one of the key markets that we support. And this recognition is a testament to the level of commitment, innovation, and service that we provide to all of our clients. Being selected at this level underscores the trust our clients place in us and reflects our relentless pursuit of excellence in IT support, cybersecurity, and compliance. And so a picture there of me on the red carpet, that's actually my daughter, Sarah. It's not my wife. She's obviously significantly younger than me, but she is head of our marketing and was instrumental in getting us here into this award. So she was able to join me there as an incredible event. All right. So as we dive in here, I wanted to cover our agenda for today. So we're going to cover these topics while discussing details about 3 organizations that took very different approaches to PCI compliance. So there's Sarah that we just met, scrambling to figure out, not Sarah, my daughter, but Sarah, the business owner, that was scrambling to figure out what PCI compliance even meant. And then there's Mike, who runs a restaurant chain and learned the hard way what happens when you ignore those requirements. And finally, there's Jennifer, who owns a growing e-commerce business and ended up doing everything right. So I want to start out by explaining what PCI DSS actually is. So Sarah had never heard of these letters before that phone call, but by the end of the day, you'll understand exactly what it means and why it exists. It's not as complicated as it sounds, and it's definitely not something you can ignore. Next, we're going to talk about why compliance really matters. Mike thought this was just more paperwork from the government, but he was wrong, and his mistake cost him 2 restaurant locations. You'll see exactly what's at stake for your business. Then we're going to talk through key updates and timeline. The rules changed this past March, and many businesses miss critical deadlines. We'll show you exactly what changed and what it means for your business operating today. We'll dive into the IT and security implications and technical stuff that confused Sarah the most. Don't worry, we'll keep it simple and practical. You're not going to need to become a tech expert, but you do need to understand what your system should be doing to protect you. After that, we'll cover how to prepare your organization. Jennifer's success story will show you the exact steps that she took to get ahead of these requirements while her competitors are still figuring out what hit them. We'll also talk about the role of a trusted IT partner. Sarah tried to handle everything herself, and we see a lot of businesses do that, but it nearly cost her the business. Jennifer partnered with experts from day one and saved both time and money. You'll see why going it alone usually is the most expensive option. Then we'll break down the SAQ overview. That's the self-assessment questionnaire system. And this determines how complex your compliance requirements are, and getting it wrong can be costly. So today we're going to help you understand which category your business falls into. And then finally, we'll have time for your questions. I know these stories might hit close to home for some of you, and you're probably wondering how they apply to your specific situation. So by the end of today, I want you to know which path you want to follow, and you can be proactive like Jennifer and set your business up for success. You can learn from Mike's mistakes without having to repeat them, or you can continue down Sarah's path of scrambling to catch up, but at least you're going to know what you're getting into. The choice is yours, but you'll have the information to make an educated decision. So before we go really into the story, I want to cover the acronyms. IT people have a lot of acronyms, and I want to make sure we're on the same page. So a lot of this language confused Sarah when she got that initial phone call. Excuse me. So PCI DSS sounds like government bureaucracy, but it's actually very simple. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. It's the rule book for businesses that accept credit cards. PAN stands for your primary account number, and that's just the credit card number itself. When Sarah heard about protecting PANs, she didn't realize that they were talking about those 16 digits on every single credit card. MFA is multi-factor authentication. Think of it as needing both a key and a security code to get into your building. Most of us are familiar with this already for authenticating to online applications or even when calling your bank, so they can verify you are who you say you are by sending a code to your phone. E2EE means end-to-end encryption. So imagine your credit card data traveling in an armored truck instead of in a regular delivery van. CDE is the cardholder data environment. That's basically anywhere in your business where credit card information lives or travels. So for Sarah, that included her computers, her payment terminals, even the network cables connecting them. So SIM stands for Security, Information, and Event Management. It's like having security cameras that not only record everything, but also have someone watching them and can spot problems immediately. Then MDR is Managed Detection and Response. And that's like having a security team that not only watches, but also is going to jump into action immediately when something goes wrong. The key that Sarah learned is that these aren't just IT buzzwords. Each one represents a potential way and hackers could get into the customer information. And so there's going to be a few more there, but you can see there's the VCISO is the Virtual Chief Information Officer. We've got the ROC is report on compliance. So hopefully understanding these keeps us all on the same page. So let's go ahead and dive in. What is PCI DSS? So let me first take you back to 2003, a few years ago. So a major retailer got hacked. There were millions of credit card numbers that were stolen, and customers ended up stopping there. The company's stock price crashed, and online other retailers really watched in horror what was going on. So the major credit card companies, there's Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they realized that there was a problem. Too many businesses were getting hacked because they didn't know how to protect customer data properly. So in 2004, they created PCI DSS. So think of it sort of as a safety menu, like the building codes that keep restaurants from burning down. The current version, which is 4.0, came out in 2022 and became a requirement in March of 2024 when the old rulebook was officially retired. So here's what Sarah didn't realize. This wasn't just paperwork. Businesses had to actually upgrade their security systems, or they'd lose their ability to accept credit cards entirely. So why PCI DSS matters to you? So let me tell you about Mike. He owns 4 restaurants across town. That's a family business that his grandfather started. And Mike's always been focused on great food and great customer service. Technology, though, not so much. 2 years ago, Mike's restaurants got hacked. Criminals installed malware on his point of sale systems and stole credit card information from over 10,000 customers. And unfortunately, local news picked up the story. Local restaurant chain breached. And Mike just watched the online reviews plummet. Regular customers stopped coming. And 2 of his locations out of the 4 had to close permanently. And Mike learned that PCI compliance isn't just about avoiding fines, though he paid plenty of those too. It's about protecting the trust that took his family, I think 3 generations to build. So, it's not something that was overnight. And unfortunately, with that one incident, destroyed half the business. So let me go over the PCI DSS 4.0 timeline. So Jennifer and how she got ahead of this while her competitors fell behind. It started again back in March 31st of 2022 when the PCI DSS version 4.0 is officially released. Think of this as when new building codes get published. The rules exist, but they're going to give you time to prepare before they become mandatory. So most business owners, including Mike and Sarah, completely ignored this date. They figured it was just another update that wouldn't affect them. And Jennifer was different, though. She was already working with an IT consultant who explained what was coming and why she needed to pay attention, and so she could plan for these changes. And the first major milestone hit on March 31st, 2024, when 3.2.1, which is the previous version, was officially retired. That meant that the old rules were gone for good. No more extensions, no more grace periods. You had to start following the new requirements now. And Jennifer had already begun upgrading her systems by this point. Mike and Sarah, unfortunately, they still hadn't heard about any of this. And then came the big deadline, March 31st of this year, 2025. And this is when all the new requirements became mandatory. There were no more warnings, no more preparation time, a grace period, multi-factor authentication for all cardholder data environments, TLS 1.2 and encryption, along with comprehensive logging and SIM systems, frequent scanning, penetration testing, everything like that had to be in place and working. And if you're not there now, you're not alone. There are a lot of businesses that are not doing this. So Jennifer fortunately sailed through this deadline because she'd been preparing for over a year. Her systems were already upgraded. Her staff was trained. She had the policies there and it was documented. So when March 2025 came and went, she didn't even notice because she was already doing the things that she needed to do. Mike and Sarah, however, that's when their problems started. Mike got his first penalty notice in April. Sarah got that phone call we talked about earlier, and they were both scrambling to implement changes that could have been done months earlier if they were prepared. And now, here we are today. Organizations have to demonstrate continuous compliance. It's not just pass an annual compliant audit, but ongoing adherence to these requirements every single day and show proof that these things have been done. Jennifer's business is thriving because she's not dealing with compliance emergencies. Mike is still paying penalties monthly while trying to fix his systems. And Sarah managed to get compliant, but it cost her 3 times what it would have done if she had known the steps early, prepared early, instead of having that knee-jerk reaction and trying to get there now after the fact. The timeline was clear, these deadlines were firm, and the consequences for missing them are real. The businesses that paid attention early are the ones that are winning today, and the ones that waited are still playing catch up and paying for their delay. So the requirement categories, PCI requirements break down into 6 main categories, and I'll walk you through each one. Starting with the story of how Jennifer protected her business, the e-commerce business and the growing business that she was hosting there. So category 1, you have to build and maintain secure network systems. When Jennifer started, she had one computer connected directly to the internet with no protection. That's like leaving your front door wide open. She learned to install firewalls and secure her network infrastructure, building digital walls around her business. The next category, or category 2, is to protect the cardholder data. And so Jennifer discovered that she was actually storing partial credit card numbers in her order system. So because she was storing that information, there was a requirement that she had to implement encryption and data protection measures. So essentially putting customer data in a digital vault so only authorized systems could access it. The next category, category 3, is to maintain a vulnerability management program. What this means is regularly scanning for weaknesses and keeping all software updated. Traditionally, you would have to have a quarterly scan that your processor would do. You would give them the public IP address of your company. If you have a website, you'd have to include that as well. And they would do penetration testing to make sure that they didn't find any vulnerabilities. So Jennifer learned like this was having a regular security inspections of her building. So you just can't set it and forget it. One of the things that changed with version 4.0 is not just these quarterly external scans, but regular internal vulnerability scans are now required as well. All right, category 4 is to implement strong access control measures. Jennifer had to ensure that only the right people could access sensitive systems. She implemented unique user IDs, strong passwords, and restricted access on a need-to-know basis. It's like giving different keys to different employees based on what areas they need to enter. And this is super important. If you have a company that's sharing passwords, sharing usernames today, if you have a security breach, you don't have the ability to know where this breach came from and which employee caused that breach. And so it's super important to make sure that every employee has a unique login. So if there is an event, you can trace that event down and find out, how that event happened and occurred. All right, category 5 is to regularly monitor and test networks. And this is where SIM systems and logging comes in. Jennifer needed security cameras that not only recorded everything, but had someone actively watching for suspicious activity 24/7. And the last category is to maintain an information security policy. Jennifer had to document all her security procedures, and it's not just for her, but she had to train all of her employees on these. That's like having an employee handbook, but for cybersecurity. Everyone needs to know the rules to follow and to make sure they are following them consistently. So each category kind of builds on the other, and it creates a comprehensive security framework that protects both Jennifer's business and her customers' sensitive information. So here's some key IT-specific changes. So again, remember Sarah, when she finally got an IT consultant to assess her systems, they found a lot of things. First, multi-factor authentication for all CDE access became mandatory this past March. Sarah's point of sale system only required a simple password, no multi-factor authentication. So that's kind of like having a jewelry store where the vault only needed a single key that everyone could copy. Obviously, that's a problem. TLS version 1.2 encryption became the minimum standard, and so older versions of TLS are no longer secure and not allowable. So Sarah's credit card data was being transmitted with old encryption that hackers can crack in minutes. It was like shipping diamonds in a paper envelope instead of an armored truck. Comprehensive logging and SIM systems became required. Sarah had no monitoring systems, so if hackers got in, they could steal information for months without anyone noticing. They were just doing business as normal. It was like having security cameras that weren't actually recording anything. They might act as a deterrent for someone who sees it, but if someone actually comes in and does something or is stealing information, that's not going to be helpful in figuring that out. Frequent scanning and penetration testing became mandatory earlier this year, and Sarah's systems hadn't been tested for vulnerabilities in several years. So basically, it's like checking to see if your locks ever worked. And then the cloud and shared responsibility requirements became effective in March of 2024. So that wasn't this year, that was last year. Sarah was using cloud services, but had no idea she was still responsible for configuring those securely. And all five of these became mandatory in this past March. So with the cloud shared responsibility, even effective over a year ago in 2024. So that made Sarah scramble to fix them now. And again, they should have been in place a long time ago. So here's some common compliance challenges. What our IT team finds when we walk into most small businesses for the first times is the same problems that left Sarah and Mike vulnerable. There are legacy systems without modern encryption. So no one wants to invest in new hardware, new infrastructure if they have stuff that they think is running and working properly. I mean, we want to obviously keep as much money for a profit. And as you upgrade things, that's going to have a cost associated. We understand that. No one wants to do that. But we walk into businesses running point of sale systems that are still on Windows 7. Here in 2025, in October, which is just next month, or in a little over a month, Windows 10 is going to be not supported by Microsoft. Windows 7 hasn't been supported by years for Microsoft, so it's a vulnerability issue. Credit card terminals that haven't been updated since 2015 are an issue as well. They're using old encryption standards to transmit data that's a risk. And again, computers that are not supported anymore can't support modern security software. It's kind of like trying to protect a modern business with security technology from the flip phone era. I do know some people that are still using flip phones. Shadow IT and unmanaged endpoints. This is where we find employees who've downloaded their own apps. They've set up personal cloud storage for work files. They're accessing business systems from their home computers that have no security protection. They install their own wireless access devices because their wireless isn't stronger and ultimately leave an open area to the network. So Sarah discovered her employees were checking work email on the same laptops their kids were using for gaming. What this does is create direct pathways for malware to reach her payment system. Weak documentation and policies. The issue here is, we go in and ask every business owner for their security policies, and oftentimes they'll hand us a dusty binder from, 5-10 years ago, or admit that they don't have any written policies at all. Mike's restaurant had no documented procedures for handling credit card data, so each location was making up their own rules, creating inconsistencies and vulnerabilities across the entire operation. There are third-party vendor risks. Most businesses have no idea what security standards their vendors follow. Sarah was using a website hosting company that stored their customer data on unsecured servers. She was responsible for PCI compliance, but she had no control over or really even knowledge of how her vendors were protecting that data. And this is huge for supply chain. We're seeing a lot of changes where supply chain, large grocery stores are reaching out to their vendors to make sure that the vendors are doing their due diligence, because what happens in the supply chain, and we saw this during COVID, but we've seen it during cyber attacks as well, that some type of cyber event that takes down a business for several weeks, obviously it has a domino effect and will impact that entire supply chain. And so businesses that rely on those companies need to make sure that the supply chain is being protected. So if you haven't seen that yet, expect it. And then there's staff training gaps. This is a big one. We regularly find employees that don't even know how to spot phishing emails. They share their passwords with other employees or who think the little lock icon on the browser means they're completely secure. The best security system in the world can't protect you if someone clicks on the wrong link or gives their password to a scammer. It's a huge risk. Employees are the biggest risk for a cyber threat. So we call it security archaeology, if I can talk today. So it's digging through layers of old technology, their forgotten passwords, improvised solutions to find, all these vulnerabilities that really have built up over the years. And again, we've been in business for 31 years. The things that we were doing even 2 years ago have to be updated for the new cybersecurity environment that we're living in today. So all businesses need to be aware of this. So what are some of the IT best practices for PCI DSS? So Jennifer's story, it really shows us what success looks like. When she decided to get serious about security, here's what she implemented, and I'll share that with you. So regular scanning and patching became her weekly routine. So think of this having a maintenance crew that's going to check every lock and alarm system every single week. Jennifer's team reviews vulnerability scans monthly, apply security patches immediately when they're released, because she learned that hackers move fast. Waiting even a few weeks to patch a critical known vulnerability can be the difference between safety and a breach. Excuse me. All right, better. So network segmentation was her next priority. So her payment systems are now completely isolated from everything else in her business. It's kind of like keeping the jewelry vault in a separate building from the customer showroom. So even if hackers get into her email or website, they're not going to be able to reach systems that handle the credit card data. So this adds an extra layer of security. There's endpoint protection and MDR. That became her digital security guards. Every computer, tablet, device in her business has this advanced antivirus protection, and she has 24/7 monitoring service watching for threats. So it's like having both a burglar alarm and a security company that watches her store around the clock and can respond immediately to any problems. So even if you have security software installed on that, if you're not using an MDR, what that happens is a lot of these attacks come from overseas. So very different time zones. It can be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, if you get hit, even if you have the login and everything like that, you may not know it until your IT company comes in the next day, or your IT provider, or you get some email saying, hey, we've seen some concerns. But after several hours, they could have access to everything. And so that immediate 24/7 response and to take the measures necessary to shut down any threats is super important. So employee security training, it really transformed her biggest vulnerability into her biggest defense. So Jennifer now runs monthly security training sessions where her staff learns to spot phishing emails, use strong passwords, follow proper procedures. Again, it's simple things, but not having that knowledge creates a great risk. And she learned that the best firewalls in the world can't protect you if someone falls for a fake email or gives away their login credentials. One of the things we're seeing now is you've always been told, don't open up an attachment unless it's from someone you trust. We have seen in the supply chain emails that come through that have invoices from companies you're used to getting invoices from. So it's a trusted source. However, that company in your supply chain got hacked and you didn't know it, they didn't know it. And now they sent out a invoice and a PDF that actually has malware attachment to it. And they're trying to now get into your systems and propagate threat to all of your customers. And so it goes beyond just making sure you don't open an attachment from someone that you trust, because we have seen vulnerabilities come from trusted resources. Documentation and audit readiness means Jennifer always knows where she stands. She maintains detailed records of all her security measures, policies, and procedures. When audit time comes, she's not scrambling to find paperwork or explain what she's been doing. Everything's documented, she's ready to go, and she has proof of compliance that makes that audit go super easy. One of the key insights from Jennifer's success, all these things could have been in place before March. If you don't have them yet, you're already behind the ball, and you really need to catch up immediately. The businesses that are thriving now are the ones that made these investments before the deadline. They had plenty of time to do this, and instead of playing catch up where you're feeling rushed. So compliance isn't just a checkbox. Mike learned this lesson the hard way. Before his breach, he thought compliance was like renewing his business license. Excuse me. It's something that you do once a year and forget about. Here's how the old approach worked for Mike. Every December, he'd get a reminder about his PCI audit. He'd call his IT guy, who would spend a week running around, updating passwords, patching systems, and fixing, anything that was found that was broken. They'd get their certificate, and then Mike would file it away, and everyone would breathe a sigh of relief then. However, for the next 11 months, security was completely off Mike's radar. Didn't do any monitoring. There weren't updates, no checking to see if anything had changed. It's kind of like getting your car inspected once a year and never checking the oil, brakes, or tires in between. And your vehicle, if you're driving it regularly, needs to have regular maintenance on that. The annual audit mindset left him vulnerable 11 months out of every 12. And guess when the hackers struck? It was right in the middle of that, the 11th month when he wasn't paying attention. So the new reality under PCI 4.0 is completely different, and it's to help fix these problems. Continuous monitoring and improvement means that you're always watching, you're always updating, and you're always staying ahead of threats. It's like having that security guard that never goes off duty. So Jennifer was fortunate, she figured this out early. Instead of cramming all her security into 1 month, she spread it out across the entire year. And that made it easy on the budget. It made it easy on the timeline for implementation, and just makes any type of project easier to spread that out instead of time crunch. Monthly security reviews, quarterly system updates, and continuous monitoring of her networks, all things make her know that her company is secure. And when audit time comes around, it's just another day, not a crisis. So this ongoing compliance requirement, is not a nice to have anymore. So it is mandatory via PCI version 4.0. And you can't just flip a switch once a year and call yourself secure. The hackers don't take 11 months off. Your security shouldn't do that either. And here's the reality that, unfortunately, Mike and Sarah both discovered. And that's trying to maintain this level of continuous security yourself. It's like trying to be your own 24/7 security guard. You'll never sleep. That's why having a managed IT and compliance service became essential, not optional. Jennifer doesn't have to worry about monitoring her systems at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. Her IT team is doing that for her. She doesn't have to remember what patches need to be installed this month. That's handled automatically. One of the things that we do with patches specifically is we do a vetting of them. Microsoft released patches twice last year that broke printing, for example. So we have a very small delay, but we know very quickly if a new patch is going to cause problems. And we hold off, make sure there's no issues with the patch, and then we automatically deploy that patch to the systems that need it. So Mike wishes he had understood this better before his breach. Now, unfortunately, he knows that compliance isn't something you achieve once and forget about. It's something you really need to live every single day. So what is the role of a trusted IT partner? So here's the reality that Sarah discovered. So trying to handle PCI compliance yourself is kind of like trying to be your own lawyer, accountant, and marketing department all at the same time. And again, if you've got a great team and you have segmented individuals that can do that full time, that's great. Larger companies can do that. Most small to mid-sized businesses can't. And so when Sarah got that compliance call, she spent weeks trying to understand that requirement. She bought books. You can learn to do just about anything on YouTube these days. She called different vendors for quotes, but it was still costing her about 40 hours a week on security instead of running her business. And unfortunately, she didn't have the expertise and the knowledge to make sure she was doing it right. She was just relying on what she learned on YouTube. So the challenge here is that these requirements keep changing too. What worked last year might not work today. There are new threats that emerge constantly, and the rules evolve to address them. Sarah found herself trying to become an expert in something that changes faster than she could learn it. And that's where we come in. At Iler Networking and Computing, we provided what Sarah needed from day one, a complete compliance service that also handles all the technical details. Our compliance as a service means that you don't have to become the security expert. We handle all the ongoing requirements, monitoring, and reporting. So think of it like having a full-time compliance department without the overhead of hiring and training your own staff that does that. We also offer virtual CISO services. What that is CISO is a Chief Information Security Officer. It's like having a security expert on your team without the six-figure salary. Jennifer uses our vCISO services to make a strategic security decisions for her growing business. So this is how we help her prepare for the future. She gets executive level security guidance at a fraction of the cost of hiring someone full-time. Our 24/7 MDR and SIM services mean we're watching your systems around the clock. And if you remember Mike's restaurant breach, it went undetected for months because nobody was monitoring his systems. We work with our managed detection and response services, and then threats get spotted and stopped immediately, even at 3 a.m. on weekends when you're not thinking about work. One of the things that we've seen with cyber attacks, 10 years ago when ransomware became popular, ransomware would get on your system and immediately lock your files and then try to get you to pay, typically through Bitcoin, to decrypt them. And if you didn't have a backup, that was your only luck in getting the data back. So we obviously have rules and policies. So if you have a good backup, you don't have to cave into ransomware. But anyway, what they're doing now is they get access to systems and now they wait. So just like what Mike experienced, and they were on there for months, even with ransomware, they are going to go throughout your entire network, see what other systems they can infiltrate, and find out as much as they can about your business, and monitor your emails, learn about your customers, everything like that. they can customize phishing emails then that actually match your email signature. So there's so much that they're doing to kind of cultivate their attack on you, and you don't even know that you've been hacked. And so it's very, very different on what this threat is. But with our managed detection and response services, we detect that even before they flip the switch and disable your accounts, and we can stop them before, again, they get throughout everything. All right, vendor management. This is another headache that Sarah really didn't expect. So when she discovered that she was responsible for making sure, all of her third-party providers were also compliant, there's her website hosting company, there's her payment processor, even her cloud storage provider. She had to verify that their security standards and get documentation from each one to make sure that she was compliant. And so we handle all of that. It's called vendor oversight, so that you don't have to chase down certificates and these compliance reports from a dozen different companies. We have them all documented, and so in the event of an audit, we have them all right here so that you can give them to the auditor and you'll pass with flying colors. End user training turned out to be critical. For Sarah, her biggest risk wasn't her technology, it was her employees accidentally clicking on phishing emails or using weak passwords. So we provide ongoing security training that keeps your team aware of what these latest threats are and teaches them how to be your first line of defense. But we go against just the training, just like our kids at school, they learn the subjects they have to do, but the teachers are testing them to make sure they know what they learned and are doing it accordingly. So we actually do phishing testing against your employees, and we monitor that to make sure that if they do click on them, it's additional training and educating that we can do to make sure they know, hey, I probably shouldn't have, or definitely shouldn't have clicked on that. And again, just helps them to be a better employee, and it reduces the risk that you have for your company. For Sarah, it was like hiring that trusted mechanic who takes care of her car so she can focus on driving her business forward. She doesn't need to understand how the engine works. She just needs to know that it's running properly and is going to be there and get her where she needs to go. So how does Iler Networking Computing simplify PCI compliance? So here's exactly how we would have helped Sarah from the beginning if she had come to us, and how we help businesses avoid the chaos that she went through. So first, we'll start with a gap analysis. So think of this as a complete security physical for your business. When Sarah finally called us, we walked her through the entire operation. So we went with her through her computers, her payment system, her network, even how our employees handled credit card information. And within a few days, we had a complete picture of exactly what needed to be fixed, and we could prioritize everything based on risk and cost. There was no more guessing for her, no more wondering if she was missing something critical. Next, we provide continuous monitoring and reporting that actually makes sense. So instead of Sarah trying to figure out if she's compliant by reading technical manuals, watching YouTube, that type of thing, we give her a very simple dashboard that shows her status in plain English. Green means you're good, yellow means we're watching something, and red means we have to take action on this. So she gets a monthly report that her accountant can understand, not a technical document that needs someone with a computer science degree to understand. Third, when the audit time comes, we've completed simplified auditor reports that now makes the whole process smooth, and this is huge. Remember how Sarah used to scramble every year, trying to find documentation, explain your system to auditors? We handle that for her. We maintain all the technical documentation. There's compliance reports that we've prepared. We even sit on audit calls to answer the technical questions, and the auditor gets everything they need. Sarah doesn't have to stress for it anymore. So fourth, and this is the big one, we reduce the IT burden so Sarah can now focus on growth. All of us hopefully have that goal, is to make our business better, more profitable. So she's not spending 20 hours a week trying to understand security requirements anymore. She's not lying awake at night wondering if her systems are secure. She's back to doing what she does best, which is running her business, serving her customers, and watching her business grow. So the result, Sarah now spends her time on revenue generating activities instead of compliance headaches. Her stress level dropped, her business is more secure than it's ever been, and she actually sleeps better at night knowing experts are watching over everything. All right, one of the things we talked about in the definitions is the SAQ. So what is an SAQ? When Sarah first heard about SAQs, which are the self-assessment questionnaires, a common thought is this is just more paperwork to fill out. But what she didn't understand is that SAQs are like different levels of security requirements. It's based on how you handle credit cards, and there's a bunch of them. So it's like how the health department has different inspection requirements for a food truck. versus a full restaurant kitchen. The key then is choosing the right SAQ for your business. And if you get it wrong, you could be making things way more complicated than they need to be, or worse, you could be underprotecting your business and not even knowing it. So let's take a look at the SAQ types. So we'll go through the SAQ types using real business examples because understanding which one applies to you is super important. So SAQ-A, this is for businesses like Jennifer's that have fully outsourced their payment processing. So if you use their Stripe, there's PayPal, Square, for example, to handle e-commerce and your website never actually touches the credit card data, then this is probably what you would be under. It's the simplest level because you've essentially handed off all the risk to someone else. The next one is SAQ AEP. It's for businesses that have their own e-commerce websites, but they manage the checkout processes themselves. So for this case, think of an online store where customers enter their credit card information kind of directly on the website, and then you're still using a third-party processor. It's more complex than SAQ-A because your website is actually handling sensitive data, even if it's only briefly. And so there's important considerations for that. So the next one is SAQ-B, and this applies to small retailers like Sarah's that use simple imprint machines or dial-out terminals. So these are basic card readers that don't connect to the internet. They use old POT services that dials a phone number to process payments. This is actually a lower risk because there's no internet connection for hackers to exploit. And so it might be older technology, but it still works well for this cause. Typically, it is a little bit slower, though. SAQ-B IP, though, that covers businesses with the modern card terminals that actually connect to the internet. I would say most retail stores today use these IP-connected terminals. They're convenient, they're faster than the dial-up ones, and because they're connected to your network, they require more security measures than the old dial-out terminals. SAQ-C-BT is for businesses that use virtual terminals. And so essentially these are websites where you manually type in credit card information to process phone or mail orders. You're not storing the data, you're just entering it to process individual transactions. So there are many service businesses that use this approach. Next one is SAQ-C, which applies to businesses that have custom internet payment applications that don't store credit card data. So maybe you built your own checkout system or have integrated with the processor in a custom way, but you're not keeping any of that payment information on your servers, then this SAQ applies to you. There's SAQ P2PE HW, and so this is businesses that are using a validated point-to-point encryption. We talked about that in the definition, the P2PE. And so this is specialized equipment that will encrypt credit card data from the moment that it's swiped until it reaches the processors. So we would say this is like having an armored truck for your payment data. It's very secure, but you have to make sure you have specific validated equipment that covers this. And the last one we'll cover is the SAQ-D, and this is the big one. Fortunately, most merchants and service providers for small and mid-sized businesses don't fall under this. This covers all merchants and providers that if you're going to store credit card data, if you have complex custom systems, or if none of the other categories fit your situation, then you're looking at SAQ-D. And this has the most requirements because you're handling the highest risk. And so that's going to be the most intensive. So the thing to remember here is this: getting your SAQ level wrong can be expensive. If you choose a simpler SAQ when you should be using a more comprehensive one, then basically you're leaving security gaps that could cost you everything. And that's what happened to Mike. He thought he was qualified for simple SAQ, but his custom restaurant systems actually put him at a much higher risk category, and he just wasn't aware. So which SAQ applies? Again, the story of Mike's mistake shows about why getting this right is so critical. Mike thought because he used a third-party payment processor, he could use the simplest SAQ, but he didn't realize that his custom point-of-sale system and the way it integrated with this processor put him at a higher risk. This is something that you've got to understand. So if you're a simple retail shop with basic terminals, you're probably looking at SAQ-B. If you're completely outsourcing payment processors like Jennifer, SAQ-A might work. Don't get it wrong. If you've got any custom systems that store payment information or have complex integrations, then you really need an expert to help determine the right level. And getting this wrong really costs Mike his business. So why IT help is critical for SAQs. Sarah learned this lesson when she tried to figure out her SEQ level herself. She spent several weeks researching online, and she was actually convinced that she would qualify for SEQA. A lot of small businesses do, because she used a payment processor. We hear this a lot. Well, we use Stripe. We use these different ones. But what she missed were the technical details of how her e-commerce website integrated with a processor. And that makes the big difference. Those details bumped her up to a higher SAQ level, which had more stringent requirements. And if she had just done the SAQ-A, she would not be meeting those requirements and would leave herself open to vulnerabilities. So here's the thing about misclassifying your SAQ, and it creates a serious risk. If you choose the SAQ that's too simple for your actual setup, you're not implementing the security controls that you actually need. It'd be like wearing a bicycle helmet when you're riding a motorcycle. You think you're protected, but it's not going to do much in the event you actually need it. So Mike made this exact mistake. He thought because he used a third-party payment processor, he could use one of the simpler SAQs. And what Mike didn't realize is that his custom point-of-sale system and the way it integrated with his processor put him in a much higher category. He was following the wrong rules, which left massive security gaps that hackers eventually ended up exploiting. And here's something then that surprises a lot of business owners. Even when you outsource payment processing, you still have merchant responsibilities. Jennifer learned this early on. So just because Stripe was handling her credit card processing didn't mean she could ignore security completely. She was responsible for securing her website, protecting her customer data, and making sure her integration with Stripe followed security best practices. So think of this as like hiring a security company to guard your building. They're responsible for watching the doors, but you are still responsible for making sure those doors have good locks and your employees know how to use them properly and that the locks actually get locked. And so that's where a company like us really becomes critical. So when Sarah finally called us, we identified the correct SEQ level. It only took us about 20 minutes. We looked at her actual technical setup. It was not what she thought it was, but what it really was, and immediately knew what requirements applied to her situation. After we do that, then we helped her implement the right controls. Sarah had been trying to figure out multi-factor authentication on her own for weeks. We had it set up and working properly in one afternoon. Same thing with her logging system. Her network segmentation, her encryption requirements, all these things would have taken her months to research and implement. We handled it in a matter of days, and it would be questionable if she actually would have implemented it correctly. And then when the audit time came around, we prepared all of her documentation. Instead of Sarah scrambling to explain her technical setup, we provided clean, professional documentation, and it clearly showed which SAQ applied and how all these requirements were being met. Those 3 weeks that she had spent, researching really could have been 3 weeks focusing on growing her business. The months she would have spent implementing controls on her own were months she could have been serving customers and increasing revenue. And really, when you think about it, that's the real cost of trying to handle SAQs yourself. It's not the risk of getting it wrong. It's not just the risk, because that is a big risk, but it's all the time that you're spending on instead of doing what actually makes you money. So let's cover some real world breach examples. Here's some real numbers and examples that show exactly what's at stake, when businesses don't take PCI compliance seriously. And so there's just 3 of them we're going to cover. So the first one here, it was a major retailer that got hit with point of sale malware. So that is malicious software that infected their point of sale systems. Once hackers got access to that, then they were able to distribute across hundreds of locations, and they stole credit cards from millions of customers. That company alone lost over $160 million. That was in fines, legal costs, and remediation efforts, and they're still dealing with lawsuits years later. Next one is a restaurant chain story, similar to what happened to Mike, just bigger. They kept putting off their compliance requirements, thinking they could get by with the bare minimum. When auditors finally caught up with them, they were hit with massive fines for noncompliance. They're still paying monthly penalties 2 years later because they can't seem to get their systems properly secured. And the more systems you have, the more locations you have, the more complex it's going to be and the more time it's going to take. Then we also saw an e-commerce site get completely compromised through an insecure integration. They thought because they used a third-party payment processor that they were automatically protected, and a lot of businesses think that. But again, the way that their website connected to that processor had security flaws, and hackers ended up exploiting that. Customer data was stolen, their reputation was destroyed, and eventually it actually shut down the business after they had $3.5 million in remediation costs and legal settlements. So those numbers are staggering, and here's a few other numbers that, if you're not protected, should keep you up at night. So according to IBM's report on the cost of a data breach, It's now over $4 million. And that's the average cost. And it's not just immediate cleanup costs. That includes cost of lost business, legal fees, regulatory fines, and the long-term damage to your reputation. And here's what really hurts small businesses. The card brands, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they can fine you anywhere from $5,000 to $100,000 per month for non-compliance. That's not a one-time penalty. That is a monthly penalty until you fix the problem and become compliant. So think about that. Even if you're paying that minimum $5,000 a month in penalties, that's $60,000 a year that you're throwing away on fines instead of investing in your business. And for many small businesses, those monthly penalties can literally put you out of business. So these aren't theoretical risks or scare tactics. They are real businesses with real owners like you and me who lost everything because they didn't take PCI compliance seriously. So the question is, are you going to learn from their mistakes, or are you going to become the next cautionary tale? So here's a shared responsibility matrix. One thing that's confused Sarah was understanding what she was responsible for and what her IT provider should handle. Think of it sort of as owning a car. You're responsible for having a valid driver's license, following the traffic laws, and keeping your registration current. Your mechanic, however, is then responsible for making sure the engine runs properly, the brakes are up to date and working properly, and all the safety systems function correctly. And PCI compliance, there's a clear division of responsibilities. Understanding the split is really crucial for success. So on the merchant side, or your side, that you as a business owner, you handle three key areas. First, there's policies and training. So you've got to establish security policies for your business and make sure your employees know them and follow them. That means you've got to create written procedures for how to handle credit card information. What are you going to do if someone suspects a security incident? Basic security practices like password management. How long do your passwords have to be? How often do you have to change them? Make sure you never write them down on paper. Okay, use an encrypted system if you're going to store them someplace, and we have solutions for that. So Sarah learned that she couldn't just assume her employees knew how to handle customer payment information safely. She had to document the rules and to train the people on them. And for compliance purposes, you actually have to track and have each of your employees sign that they understand the policies and they're going to follow them. So it's not just okay that they read them. So next, there's vendor management. And this one surprised Sarah. She thought once that she hired an IT company, they'd handle all the vendor relationships. But she is still responsible for making sure that every vendor that touches her business meets security standards. Her web hosting company, her payment processor, her cloud storage provider, her supply chain, everyone like that. She needs to verify their compliance and get proof of compliance from everyone. So it's like being the general contractor that makes sure all the subcontractors are licensed and insured. On the IT provider side, and that's where we come in, we handle the technical heavy lifting. So network security is our job. We design and maintain firewalls. We secure the wireless networks, make sure your business systems are properly protected from the outside threats. So when Sarah's network needed to be segmented so our payment systems were isolated from everything else, that was our responsibility to design and implement. If you have one wireless network and you ever have a vendor come in and allow them to connect because they need internet access, and that's the same system that all of your systems are on, that's a huge vulnerability. You need to make sure that any non-employee connects to a separate, like internet-only protected website. We'll call that like a guest network or an Internet of Things network, and we can help you set that up. So that way you can have your customers and vendors access the internet, because so much is dependent on the internet now, but they still keep it isolated from your system. So there's protection there. There's MDR and SIM, that's managed detection and response, plus security information and event management. So this is our 24/7 monitoring responsibility. So we're the ones that are watching your systems around the clock, looking for suspicious activity, responding immediately when threats are detected. So remember Mike's breach that went undetected for months? That wouldn't happen with proper MDR and SIM in place. We get, even if people don't get into your system, we get alerts when they're trying to get into your system, and we can take extra steps to make sure that those attacks are blocked. Patching and scanning, we talked about that a little bit, but that's also on our side. We make sure that all your systems, they stay up to date with the latest security patches. We regularly scan for vulnerabilities before hackers can find them, but we make sure that security patches that aren't required or could impact your system or cause downtime aren't pushed until they are fixed. Microsoft pushed Windows 10 out and Windows 11 out as a recommended update And unfortunately, when Windows 10 came out, there were a lot of systems that were not compatible, legacy software. And so businesses that had that apply overnight came in and they couldn't do their work because none of their systems worked, because all of a sudden they are running Windows 10 now because Microsoft in their infinite wisdom thought that that was a good update. So we will block those types of updates, but we look at every single update and apply the ones that need to happen in a very timely manner to make sure that you are protected. So, and again, this is very specialized knowledge that you need a technical person or a team to handle. Tools most business owners are not going to have. So we mentioned this earlier, if you're still running computers with Windows 10, Microsoft didn't support in October. So you should have a plan for upgrading or replacing the systems as soon as possible, so you're not coming to a time crunch there. So the key to this matrix, though, since there are 3 columns here, is to make sure that both sides understand the responsibilities. And as any good partnership works, you've got to work together to be effective. When Sarah tried to handle both the business and technical sides herself, there were important things that fell through the cracks and left vulnerabilities. When Mike ignored the business side and just assumed his IT guy would handle everything, unfortunately, his policies and training were non-existent, and that's how his employees accidentally opened the door for hackers. Jennifer, she got it right by partnering with Iler early. She focused on what she's good at, running her business, training her staff, and managing vendor relationships. But we handle that technical security that keeps everything protected. That's what we're good at. And it's a true partnership where everyone knows their role and executes it well. Second. So today, we focus primarily on PCI DSS compliance, but here's something that surprised Jennifer as her business grew. PCI DSS is just the beginning. As she expanded into new markets and services, she discovered that she also needed to worry about other compliance frameworks. It's like having multiple insurance policies. There's business insurance, there's liability insurance, there's cyber insurance, and each one protects against a different risk, but they all work together to keep your business safe. So let me walk through the ones you might consider. HIPAA applies if you handle any healthcare information. Jennifer discovered this with her business when she started selling wellness products and some of her customers wanted to use their health savings account. Suddenly, if she accepted health savings accounts, now she's dealing with protected health information and needed to understand HIPAA requirements. It covers how you store, transmit, and protect any health-related data. It's not just medical records, but anything that could identify someone's health information. We did a seminar like this, a webinar about HIPAA previously, so we've got a recording of that on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in that, please take a look at it. FTC safeguard rules. These hit financial service companies, but they're broader than you might think. It's not just banks. So if you're a mortgage broker, if you're an insurance agent, automobile dealership that does car loans, CPA, colleges and universities that do student loans, or even if you're a financial planner for companies, you could fall under these rules. So Jennifer ran into this when she started offering financing offerings for larger purchases. So the FTC safeguards rule requires that you have a comprehensive security program specifically designed to protect customer financial information. So if you're doing any type of loans or financing for customers, you could be required to be FTC safeguard compliant. And if you look at events.iler.com, we have a webinar that's going to cover those details as well coming up in the future. Then there's NIST CSF. That stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it's a cybersecurity framework. It's not legally required like a lot of the others, but many larger companies are now requiring their vendors to follow NIST guidelines. Jennifer found out that several corporate clients, they wouldn't even work with her unless she could demonstrate NIST compliance. And what it is, it's a comprehensive approach to cybersecurity. It covers everything from not only identifying risks to how you're going to respond to an incident once you have an incident. And here our headquarters are in Ohio. Ohio in 2018 was one of the first 3 states to be a safe harbor state for any organization that becomes NIST CSF compliant or CIS compliant. We'll talk about that later, the next step. What that means is if you have a data breach or a cyber incident and can prove that you are NIST CSF compliant, Ohio is going to limit the fees and fines that can be brought against that organization because they say you've done your due diligence from a cybersecurity standpoint. Unfortunately, there is not such a thing as 100% protection. Our goal is to get you to 99.99 and even more nines after that, % safe and secure. But the truth is, if someone has enough money and desire to get access to your systems, they can do it. If you think about the FBI and the CIA, for example, both of those organizations are huge and they spend millions on cybersecurity protection and they still get hacked. And so again, if there's enough money in a way, someone's going to get into you. For small to mid-sized businesses, our goal is to get you way up there, right below 100%, 99.99%. And it's going to be too tough for someone for the benefit of getting into your systems. It's just not going to be the ROI for them. So let's talk about CIS controls. This is the Center for Internet Security Controls. This is another framework that's similar to NIST CSF and becoming really increasingly common. So these are specific actionable security measures that organizations can implement. Many cyber insurance companies now require CIS controls as a condition of coverage. So Jennifer's insurance completely actually gave her a discount when she proved that she implemented these controls because they significantly reduce her risk from a cyber incident standpoint. So what Jennifer learned is that as your business grows and evolves, you're going to encounter multiple compliance requirements. Customer and healthcare might require HIPAA compliance, and if they take credit cards, they're going to need PCI compliance as well. A corporate company might want to see NIST framework implementation, and your insurance company might require CIS controls. So the challenge is in juggling multiple compliance frameworks, it can really become overwhelming quickly because each one has different requirements, but there is some overlap. There's different documentation needs and there's different audit processes. So Jennifer was spending more time on compliance paperwork than on growing her business. And that's where we provide a unified compliance management. It really becomes invaluable to companies that need it. Instead of Jennifer having to become an expert in 4 or 5 different compliance frameworks, we handle all of them through a single coordinated approach. We identify which frameworks apply to our business, implement controls that satisfy multiple requirements where possible, and they manage all documentation and reporting through a single system. The best part of this is that when many of these frameworks overlap, then it reduces the amount of effort to become compliant with all these frameworks. So the network security measures required for PCI DSS also satisfy many NIST requirements. The logging and monitoring needed for PCI compliance help with FTC safeguards as well. So when you meet the requirements for one, those will help cover the requirements for another. So when you work with experts who understand all these frameworks, you can also ultimately satisfy multiple requirements with a single set of well-designed security controls. So even if you only need to be NIST or PCI compliant, for example, that's what we're talking about today, but you want to be eligible to be a safe harbor here in Ohio and be NIST CSF compliant, we can help you with the little bit extra that you need to do to become NIST CSF compliant. And now you're protected if your business is in not just Ohio, but I know Iowa and there are many other states that have that protection for you. So what are the next steps for you in your organization? Here's what you need to do to then avoid ending up like Sarah and Mike. So start really with a PCI gap analysis. I would do it today. You have to know exactly where you stand right now. It's not where you think you stand, but where you actually are. And identify which SAQ level applies to your specific business model. And again, it's not something that you want to guess about. Make sure you have multi-factor authentication, comprehensive logging, and regular scanning in place. These should have been in place in March, but if they're not there yet, then you're behind the ball and you need to catch up immediately. And then most importantly, partner with experts who live and breathe PCI compliance every day, because security isn't something you don't want to handle just on the side. It requires constant attention, training, awareness, and monitoring. And again, there's new requirements that come out all the time. Our team invests in ongoing training and compliance seminars, so we're always ahead of the changes that could impact your business. And then if you've hired us to help you, we let you know and we schedule and we plan. It's a much easier implementation than trying to do that knee-jerk reaction that, oh, I'm already months behind when I'm supposed to be compliant. By working with specialists also, you gain peace of mind knowing your data and your customers' trust are fully protected. All right, a lot of information to go through. So remember Sarah's panic when she got that compliance call? You don't have to go through that. So these requirements are already in effect. This past March wasn't a suggestion. It was a hard deadline that many businesses missed. But you have a choice right now. You can be proactive like Jennifer and set your business up for success and continued success, or you can wait and hope that nothing bad happens like Mike did. And we see a lot of businesses that are successful that are doing that, but you could be one incident away from going out of business. So don't wait for that phone call. Contact Iler Networking Computing today. We've been helping businesses like yours navigate these challenges for over 30 years. And let us help you write a success story instead of a cautionary tale. So I talked about questions and answers. Again, if you have those, click on the question mark at the bottom of your screen. But before I do that, I want to let you know about a special offer. So we have a limited number of free network security assessments that we can do each month. What we'll do is come out, we'll install some of our software that's going to analyze your network, your online environments, and we're going to share that report with you and your management team. So you know if there are any urgent issues you need to take care of, or if everything's good, you're going to sleep better knowing that your systems are as secure as you need them to be. And that's great when that happens. And you can sign up for free. You can either scan the QR code you see on the screen now, or you can go to the website. It's iler.com/analysis, and I've got that link right there as well. If you have any questions, give us a call. You've got that phone number. And so that's going to bring us up to the questions. I know that these stories might have hit close to home for some of you, and you're probably wondering how they apply to your specific situation. And so remember, Sarah, Mike, and Jennifer, they all started in the same place as business owners. They wanted to focus on their customers like we all do, but not on compliance headaches. And the difference was in the choices they made and how they sought help. So I've got a couple of questions that have been asked. Go ahead, if you have additional ones, you can do that. First question I have is here, and if my business transactions are run through PayPal, does that cover me for PCI compliance? And again, the question about that is it really depends on how you do that. PayPal has integrations for your website. So as long as you are using the PayPal website to handle the capture of the credit card information, in most cases, yes, that is, but you still have requirements. You still have an SAQ that you have to follow. Dependent on if you have a form, even if it's a secure form with encryption, that you're taking the information and then sending that over to PayPal as a form, then that's very different than using a PayPal form for collecting the credit cards. So most cases, as long as everything's in PayPal, that will help with the PCI compliance, and it really limits yours, but you do have to be responsible for the SAQ. I would recommend reaching out to your payment processor because they're the ones who will a lot of times walk you through. And if you have specific questions, you can even reach out to PayPal since they are your payment processor. But if you have questions, we can do a free analysis for you as well and help you understand without a doubt if you're doing what you need to be doing. So thanks for that question. All right, here's another one we get. So what happens if my business didn't meet the March 31st, 2025 PCI DSS 4.0 deadline? Because we're going into September now. Non-compliance now basically means you're at an increased risk of fines, higher transaction fees, and even losing the ability to process credit cards. Beyond these penalties, a data breach could bring lawsuits and reputational damage. And there are many businesses that go out of business if that happens. The good news is it's not too late. Remediation, it really needs to be prioritized immediately, starting with a gap assessment. We talked about that to identify where you fall short. So a couple slides ago, we talked about here are the steps you need to be doing. I would start with those steps. If you need help, we're here to assist with that. All right, one other question. Which SAQ or self-assessment questionnaire applies to my business? Well, that depends. So how are you processing payments? A quick overview of just a few of those types that we covered earlier. If you're fully outsourced, such as PayPal, Stripe, or doing a redirect, that's typically SAQA. Make sure that that's really what is fully outsourced. If you have a merchant hosted checkout page, that could be SAQA EP. If you're using dial-out or IP-connected terminals, though, even if you're doing it through PayPal, that's SAQB or SAQB IP. If you have in-house apps or storage of card data, that's SAQD. So classifying your SAQ can create huge compliance gaps. So make sure you work with a trusted partner that can validate the correct SAQ for you and ensure that your controls match. All right. Again, along the same lines, we've got another question. We already outsource payments to a third party. Do we still have to worry about PCI compliance? So a lot of these kind of along the same lines. So yes, even if you never ever store cold hard, blah, blah. So if you're not storing the card holder data, you are responsible for securing the systems that touch the payment processes. So like your website, employee workstations, or network. So the person who just asked about PayPal earlier, the computer that accesses PayPal, you've got to make sure that that's protected. If you have spyware on that, then you type in your username and password to get into PayPal. Now that person who has the spyware can get into your PayPal account. So outsourcing will reduce your PCI scope, but it doesn't eliminate it. For example, if your e-commerce site is hacked and redirects customers to a fake checkout page, it's you that's liable because they're still coming to your website to do that. I just heard about a company, and I think it was, I got to remember which company it was. There was a really large nationwide, worldwide company actually that called in. I believe it was an airline company, and they had to change flights, and ended up the customer called the proper number, was talking to someone, and was on the phone for probably 45 minutes. Ended up after that call, they had over $10,000 in fraudulent charges that were done, but they still got the flight changed and got their ticket. So what happened is when they went and investigated, the airline that they contacted showed that the call was only like 10 minutes long, but somehow it got transferred to a third party that was not the airline that started doing fraudulent charges on them. And so it's scary. The sophisticated attacks that we're seeing are getting worse and worse. And so we have to take better steps to do that. One of the things that we had to do as an IT provider, if you've heard of deep fakes, it's very easy with AI to take a 30-second clip of someone, and now you can type in and basically have AI generate that voice with inflection and everything, and it sounds very realistic. If you have longer, you can make it more realistic. If you remember a while back, and if you didn't see this, I'm sure it's on YouTube, that's where I saw it. I think it was for America's Got Talent. Simon Cowell, they had a live video there, and they had a singer, and he's singing a song, but live they put Simon Cowell's face on there and made it sound like Simon Cowell's voice as well. And so they had it up on the screen through there. This is the power of AI. And one of the ways that this was recently, I guess that the deep fake from a video call, there was a company in Europe that was doing a video call. They thought they were talking to their CEO, and they weren't. They were doing a deep fake, but it was a video call. If you're having a conversation, and you can see and talk and it sounds like them, who's not going to believe that? It ended up, and they had a $25 million fraudulent transaction because of that call. And again, they saw and heard what they thought was the CEO, but it was an AI doing that. So one of the things we've had to do as an IT company, if you call and say, hey, I need my password changed, we have new software, and you can either put an app on your phone where we authenticate you. We will make sure we contact back. We won't take a call because you can spoof your caller ID, but we'll call you back from one of the documented phone numbers that's in our system for you. Or if you're for some reason out and about, we will have to call those documented numbers and talk to a manager that can vouch for the number that you need us to call you before we'll change your password. Otherwise, what we're doing is giving away the keys to the kingdom. So these are just some of the steps that we've had to take because of the risk of AI and these deep fakes. All right, I've got one more question here, and we're going to call it a day. So what are the most common IT failures that cause PCI compliance issues? Wow. All right, well, there's several of them here. I'll cover a few of them. So I would say, the top one is not enforcing MFA across access points. There are so many people that use the same credentials across multiple systems. And so if those credentials get compromised, and there's a lot of credentials that are out there today on the black web, the dark web or the black market, then if you use the same credentials, then they can get into a system that's also using the same credentials. Multi-factor authentication means even if someone gets your credentials, they need that MFA code, and you should be the only one that has access to that. This is something that was required since March. So if you haven't done that, that's critical. Outdated encryption protocols like TLS 1.0 and 1.1. I gotta say something that I found astounding. There are a lot of government organizations and other organizations that help provide public requirements, such as this, the encryption protocols, SSL, TLS, and things like that. NSA, national security with the government. I know they were a part of one of these way back when they were talking about SSL. But one of the things that they ended up doing was putting in a backdoor. The scary thing is, you think you're doing things through an encrypted channel, And if anyone now has access to that backdoor, encryption is pointless. It decrypts everything like that. So TLS 1.0, 1.1, these are outdated encryption protocols and there are vulnerabilities known in them. I would say failing to log and monitor systems properly, because if you don't have the logs there and you do have a cyber event, we're going to have a tough time trying to do the IT forensics and figuring out where that happens. If you have the SIM tools, then we can go back through and trace exactly where they got access to your system, which systems they've infiltrated, and make it very easy to quickly clean up your systems. Last one I'll say is, excuse me, weak vendor management, unsecured third-party integrations. So each of these gaps is preventable, with proper IT governance and monitoring. So if you come up with questions, even after we're ending now, shoot us an email, info@iler.com, that's ILER.com, or give us a call, 877-250-4537, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you've got. So if you're stressed out about wondering what to do now about your PCI compliance, now that the deadline's passed, here's a reminder of how we can help. So Iler Networking and Computing, besides providing managed IT services, we provide compliance as a service. And that includes performing the PCI gap analysis, helping you complete the correct SAQ, implementing controls like MFA, SIM, and endpoint protection, manage ongoing compliance with reporting for auditors so you're protected if and when you get audited, and providing vCISO services and guidance so that you stay compliant long-term, not just during audits. So thank you for your time. I trust it was beneficial and educational for you and your business. We'll have a recording of this webinar online, so you're able to review this in the future should you desire. So stay safe out there and have a great rest of your day.